Hello, my name is Father Bill Watson, and this is a question for our YouTube channel, Ask Me, Ask Father Bill. And we've been looking at the issue of discernment. Today, the question is, can you tell us something about trauma and discernment? Well, yes, I can. There have been great strides in understanding the impact of trauma, especially the variety called ACEs, or early childhood traumas. The list of the ACEs includes events such as child physical abuse, child sexual abuse, child emotional or verbal abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, a mentally ill, depressed, or a suicidal person in the home, a drug addicted or alcoholic family member, witnessing domestic violence against the mother, witnessing domestic violence against a father, a loss of a parent to death, abandonment by a parental divorce, just to name a few of the adverse experiences youth can and do face. And ACEs account for 44% of adult depression, 27% of asthma and COPD, and 16% of kidney disease. We should explore what is happening. George Aschenbrenner, the pioneer of the recovery of the examined practice, says people know that it's important, but he hints that undefined pressures make it difficult for persons to achieve the day-long attentiveness the examen invites. I believe I discovered what those undefined pressures were. I came across the issue of trauma and its impact on discernment during my doctoral work. In my research, 100 participants, 50 Roman Catholics and 50 Protestants from 7 different denominations, engaged in a 10-week method of the examen I had developed based on St. Ignatius's model. The research started and concluded with our proprietary whole life survey to test progress in holistic, integral human and spiritual development. An equal number of Protestants and Catholics left the research project before it concluded. And the reasons were varied, and I asked them to give a reason if they left early. And they were kind of innocuous, took too much time, too complicated, not what I thought, et cetera, et cetera. And then I wondered if there was a common denominator linking those who departed early that I could discover from the data in the whole life survey. And this is what I discovered. Every single person who departed early, Protestant and Catholic, indicated on the whole life survey that they experienced some form of early life trauma. So there you have it. The process then of engaging the examination of conscience was surfacing life events that had been forgotten, suppressed, or repressed. Not a single individual alluded to any discomfort from remembered trauma as a reason for departing the study early. Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned specialist on trauma and a close personal friend of mine, said it is his conviction that the circumstances of our birth fundamentally determine our lives. This principle was confirmed by his studies in the last decades, which is published in international bestsellers translated into over 40 languages. His research, he explored how childhood memories and trauma affect people's long-term health. A raw wound or a scar, unresolved trauma, is a constriction of the self, he says, both physical and psychological. It constrains our inborn capacities and generates an enduring distortion of our view of the world and of other people. Trauma, until we work it through, keeps us stuck in the past, robbing us of the present moment's riches, limiting who we can be. By impelling us to suppress hurt and unwanted parts of our psyche and spiritual memories, it fragments us. That fracturing is the essence of trauma. Trauma, writes Peter Levine, is about a loss of connection to ourselves, our families, and the world around us. The loss is hard to recognize because it happens slowly over time, we adapt to these subtle changes, sometimes without noticing them. Trauma, in most cases, is intergenerational, multi-generational. The chain of transmission goes from parent to child, stretching from the past into the future. We oftentimes pass on to our offspring what we haven't resolved in ourselves. Over time, as the lost connection gets internalized, it forges our view of reality. We come to believe in the world we see through its cracked lens, as Gabor Mate says. People bearing trauma's scars almost uniformly develop a shame-based view of themselves at the core, a negative self-perception most of them are all too conscious of. Among the most poisonous consequences of shame is the loss of compassion for oneself. The more severe the trauma, the more total that loss. And Mate says this, there's hope. Facing trauma directly without either denial or over-identification becomes a doorway to health and balance. But there is a further challenge in processing trauma because of how our conscious and unconscious minds work. Our lives are essentially a printout of our subconscious programs, behaviors that were fundamentally acquired from others, parents, family, community, before we were 6 years old. And a majority of these developmental programs are limiting and disempowering. And the subconscious mind shapes 95% or more of our life experiences. The conscious mind, running 1,000,000 times slower than the sheer processing power of the subconscious mind, runs the show at best only 5% of the time. But this 5% is where we have free will, and we can examine the learned programs of the subconscious by their impact on our lives. And neuroscience now proves that we can rewire those embedded experiences from early life by our willingness to take the time to be attentive to them. As Gabor Mate says, be attentive to the experiences and trauma without denial or without over-identification. So don't deny it and don't call yourself the trauma. Stand in a non-judgmental phase with Jesus, the divine physician, and just look at what's going on and be not afraid. What Mate means is that we must allow the trauma to manifest, but we should not associate the trauma with the essence of who we are as persons created in the image and likeness of God. So our challenge as Christians and Catholics, many who have had traumas in our past, is to activate the power of that 5% of our conscious mind at least once or twice a day. The 15-minute examine is best for this. For the conscious mind is our creative capacity. The conscious mind holds our wishes, our desires, aspirations for our lives. It is the mind that conjures up our positive thoughts, and it's the seat of our free will. So even though many of trauma's unconscious programs are limiting, disempowering, and desolating, we can examine their echoes with our conscious mind and learn how to discern right choices based on the affective awareness of experiences that cause consolation and increase of faith, hope, and love of God, and those of desolation, decrease in faith, hope, and love. Just remember that George Ashenbrenner talked about undefined pressures that make it difficult for us to be attentive during the day. Again, most likely that is because of past trauma and the sin it causes. But an examine can help us be attentive to these difficult experiences, and again taking Dr. Mate's wise counsel to allow Jesus, the divine physician, to be present to us in the memories of these traumas without denying them or without over-identifying with them. Trauma and discernment, a big topic, and I hope that helps.